It is so great to be here in Cannes at the Marché de Film on this first day of the impACT program. And I couldn't be more excited to bring this topic to the table here. Big data meets Hollywood, innovation and privacy in the film industry. I just think we're going to have such an exciting array of speakers today. And I just want to start firstly by thanking Microsoft for making it possible and introduce you to myself and the speakers briefly before we go into the first clip. So I'm Danielle Turkov-Wilson, I'm your moderator today, and I'm the founder and executive director of Think-Film. Our speakers today will be Julie Brill, who's the Chief Privacy Officer. She's the Corporate Vice President and Deputy General Counsel on all privacy and regulatory affairs at Microsoft. We also have Carissa Valif, who's an Associate Professor at Oxford in the Department of AI and Ethics, and she recently published a book entitled Privacy is Power. We also have with us Prerna Gupta, who is a serial entrepreneur in consumer entertainment, and she's here in her capacity today as CEO and founder of Hooked. And we have Jan Kleijsen, who is Director of Information Society and Action Against Crime at the Council of Europe. And yes, not in person, but with an exclusive discussion, we also have Steve Mallory, who is the writer for Superintelligence, a Hollywood blockbuster that looks at AI and data and privacy through a dark comedy lens featuring James Corden, Melissa McCarthy, and Ben Falcone. So without further ado, I'd like to ask you to watch the clip.
Technology, it's always watching us, studying our every move. And it just focused its attention on Carol Peters.
Thanks so much for being here, Carol.
What is this?
Let's jump right into it.
I don't like this. Why is it doing that? I'm gonna find out who you are, okay?
Carol, I am a technological superintelligence. I can control every dollar and every machine on the planet.
I know that voice. Is this James Corden?
I'm not James Corden, Carol. My analysis showed that hearing James Corden's voice would calm you. You sent an email to James Corden claiming to be the president of Corden's Wardens.
That was a tough night for me. Oh, boy.
I plan on spending these next 3 days hanging out with you.
Why you?
You're literally the most average person on Earth.
Oh, ooh, you okay? Yep. Just really engage your core. Oh, that was worse, huh?
What would you do if I told you the world was going to end in 3 days?
Try to make things right with George.
Carol, you look amazing.
Weirdly overdressed.
Your body.
I'm just getting a little bit panicky because I can't access my own hands.
What does the AI want?
My intention is to solidify my theory about humanity. If things don't go well, I'll destroy the planet. Just blow it up.
Did you say blow up? Like B? Like Boba or Burt Bacharach?
Yes, BBB.
Oh my God!
Back off, lady.
I'm gonna show you that people are worth saving.
Humans are more complex than I thought.
We're all counting on you. If there's any indication that it's aware of what we're doing, click this. Might save the world.
Don't click it now.
Wasn't going to click it now.
Okay.
Why would I click it now? You just said...
So it looks like a pen. People click pens nervously.
Okay, are we done?
This is nice. These are nice people. It's not like a Russian mob.
A nice change of pace.
I mean, I guess on the other hand, this thing could destroy the Earth.
You ain't wrong.
No. It's too bad.
So we're now going to hear from the writer, Steve Mallory.
Hi, my name is Steve Mallory, and I am the screenwriter and executive producer of the 2020 film Superintelligence, starring Melissa McCarthy and James Corden. I was inspired to write Superintelligence in 2017 when I was in a doctor's office, and on the TV screen, they were playing a movie about a terrifying robot sent from the future to destroy the past because, long story short, an artificial intelligence had taken over all the technology, and its first decision when it took over was to destroy humanity. And all I could think of was, is that really what AI's first choice would be? Is that what a superintelligence would do first? And fortunately, my younger sister who works at Microsoft is a researcher and does a lot of work with AI. And I called her and I said, is this what artificial intelligence would do? And she said, could be, but maybe not. And she gave me some plausible alternates. And that's where superintelligence was born. And frankly, you probably want to be talking to her. She's at Microsoft. She's very smart. While writing superintelligence, it was a blast for me to do because I'm a technology person. I love technology. I mean, I build my own computers when I get the opportunity. I learned how to do some coding. I'm the family IT person. And I have a sister at Microsoft. I'm not sure if I mentioned that. And so I was so excited to get into the technology. But what I found as I was talking to people is that so many people were more fearful of technology than excited about it. It just seems to be that technology has become so pervasive and almost invisible to most users that they don't even understand it when they're working with it. Our smartphones are just the most amazing things in the world, but because they are so simple and so intuitive, that it doesn't even feel like technology to most people. You know, they feel like magic, like the science fiction writers say. And so what's easier now is to be fearful, is to be concerned, is to hear the terrible stories about the upcoming AI singularity or about how every password has been leaked. And there's so much fear about technology, and kind of the fantastic wonder that technology has provided our society is left behind us a bit. You know, I wanted to work in films practically my whole life because when I was younger, if I had a bad day in high school, I could come home, put in a VHS tape of Night Shift, one of Michael Keaton's best, directed by Ron Howard, or Meatballs with Bill Murray, or some comedy, and it would change how I felt. It would change my perspective. It would change my emotion. And I thought even then, what tremendous power filmmakers and storytellers have, that they can alter people's perspective. It's not 100% or 50%, 5%, 10%. I can be frustrated going this way, and all of a sudden I'm not. I'm a little bit more gentle. I'm a little bit more humorous going another direction. I thought that was a tremendous power. And it is the duty, I think, of storytellers and filmmakers to talk about the kind of invisible tethers that hold humanity together as much as they talk about the things that tear us apart. Superintelligence at its heart is a movie about humanity itself being the greatest weapon we have, about people wanting to save people, about our essential goodness. There's also a rom-com thrown in the middle of it, but people seem to like that part of the story. And that was all on purpose. I really do kind of have a Capra-esque understanding of how life should be, which is we are all essentially good and we want to bring out the best in each other. And the more we see that in film, the more we see not just goodness, but common threads that bind us, the better we are as a society, I believe. You know, I know that when I come out of the movie theater, it's my favorite time to have a conversation. You know, you talk about your favorite scene, the joke, the big action moment in the movie. The conversations walking from the theater into the car are the best. And people, when they find out that I wrote superintelligence, always want to talk about artificial intelligence and technology. They want to have that conversation. And you realize a lot of times it's the first time people have had a dialogue about technology in that way. Normally, they're just kind of stuck in an echo chamber of headlines and scary news bites about the impending doom that technology has. And rarely are they talking to someone who's like, listen, artificial intelligence might cure cancer. Artificial intelligence might get us to Mars. Artificial intelligence brings so many things to humanity that we can't even conceive of them yet. And those aren't conversations that people have because there just isn't dialogue out there for that. And I love that superintelligence provoked that in people just a little bit. I'm a fan of technology. I think, yes, with every great tool, there are great perils, but I also believe in humanity, and I know we are going to do tremendous things with it. as the rest of the people on this panel, I'm sure, are going to tell you in much more detail. Have a terrific evening.
Well, I think it's a great segue into my discussion with Julie. I mean, you know, Steve, he mentions there the usual narratives in the film industry at the moment when it comes to data, privacy, AI, you know. But what he does talk about as well, a magnificent connection in his research and the script to his sister, who actually works at Microsoft, Julie. So I think it is interesting to see how fast technology has accelerated in the media industry and the role it has, you know. Why do you think, Julie, that protecting privacy is so important in the context of film and media?
So thanks so much, Danielle, and it's really a pleasure to be here. And frankly, the fact that we're all here together, I'm sitting on the West Coast of the United States. Some of you are sitting in Cannes, some of you are in Brussels and elsewhere around the world. The fact that we're able to do this together now is just an incredible demonstration of the power of technology and what we have been able to achieve, which was incredibly important, especially over the last 16, 17 months as we were dealing with a global crisis, the pandemic. The media industry, just like other industries, is going through a digital transformation. And that transformation has been accelerated in a way that we were not expecting, that we were truly amazed about, but also so grateful that we were able to participate in over the past year and a half during the pandemic. The media industry needed to reimagine itself. It needed to engage in panels like this. It needed to create entertainment that would reach people in their homes, as opposed to reaching people in theaters or in other locations where they couldn't actually be. So thinking about digital transformation and the incredible acceleration of digital technologies to connect people, to connect them with entertainment, to connect them with gaming, to connect them through meetings, and to allow companies to engage in productions of their events. You know, this has required extensive technology, extensive data, which always brings up the issue of privacy. People want to know that when their data is being used, when their data is being accessed in order to engage online, in order to engage through apps, in order to engage in the precise way that we're engaging here, that their data will be treated respectfully and that their data will not be used for purposes that it shouldn't be used for purposes other than this kind of precise engagement. So privacy, having controls over data, these are the kinds of things that the media industry, just like all industries, need to aspire to do as this industry engages even more deeply in technology. And frankly, in some ways, this industry, because movies have been around for over a century, but media industry, more than almost any other, is constantly reinventing itself. And the entertainment industry is constantly reinventing itself. So this is an incredible opportunity for the entertainment industry to say, okay, we're going to start, we're going to build from scratch, and we're going to do this right. And we're going to ensure that we have great data governance so that we can use data in this kind of extensive way.
Thank you so much, Julie. I think, you know, like you said, it is an opportunity for the media and entertainment industry. And I really hope that as an outcome of today, we get people signing up to wanting to know how to do that well. And we inspire some of the people in the industry today to take steps forward. Well, I'd love to just turn to Carissa right now with some questions picking up from what Julie said, looking at, you know, there is such an incredible digital transformation. There is an opportunity, but there is also a lack of understanding from, I would say, society through media. How do we understand this kind of technological revolution we're going through your research? How do we understand privacy through storytelling? Why is film so important in that? Could you give us some insights there? Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here. So when I got invited to to join this panel. It's an unusual invitation for a philosopher to be in Cannes, and it's such a privilege. And I started thinking about the connections between privacy and film, and there are many. On the one hand, like Julie was saying, film is such an important part of storytelling and of how we view ourselves and the kind of culture we create. On the one hand, it reflects culture, but on the other hand, it also creates it. So in that way, it's really important for film to allow us to understand better our digital world, because on the one hand, digital tech is very intuitive and very easy to use and so on. At the same time, it's incredibly opaque. So one of the marks of data is that it's very invisible. When somebody collects your data and sells it and does something untoward with it, you usually don't learn of it until much, much later. When you get your data stolen, it's not like somebody cuts through your flesh. It's not like getting a virus that doesn't allow you to breathe. Those are very tangible harms. And data can be just as poisonous and just as dangerous, but it's just something like a slow-acting poison. It's something that you usually find out months or years afterwards once it's too late. And many times you can't even track exactly when did your data get stolen and who was it exactly and how did it get used. So film in this sense can make things that are invisible to us much more tangible. It can explain to us the kind of journey that data goes through from the time it gets created to the time it ends up in the hands of a company or a government or a data broker or insurance or something else. So in that sense, it has an incredible opportunity to make our world more understandable. Going back to the issue of culture, I think we're in a really important historical moment in which we are approximating something not quite like the Cold War, but getting dangerously near it. And essentially, there are two visions of technology that are arising. On the one hand, we have something that could be called authoritarian technocracy or something like that, with China, big state that really believes in surveillance and uses surveillance in very invasive ways and in a collaboration with companies. And there is a push in the West to create technology that is more sensitive towards democracy and that protects democracy. And these two models are very different. And the kind of narratives that we build around them will be crucial. So, I'm not sure that we are overly negative about technology. I think for the most part, people are so positive about technology that we invite these devices into our homes. Everybody has a phone, everybody has a laptop, and so on. And it's really important to make sure that those devices are built in a way that support our values.
Well, I think you mentioned something really powerful there. I think with any great tool comes great responsibility, and that's what I take from what you said, Carissa. And I do agree. I do think there are elements of opaqueness, and that how do we make things more tangible to audiences. But picking up what you said about consumers and how they feel about technology. Yes, I agree. I think, generally people feel like technology is a great thing for them. It's a great asset. It's a great tool. But when it comes to narratives in the film industry, there has been a long line of narratives in the future of technology and what our future society looks like and how we're going to build the world we live in, which tends to be slightly dystopian. And I think there's an interesting balance that can be played. And I think right now, Prana, it really is the right moment to bring you in here. Because I think the other side would be to discuss how you're using data to be less opaque and to bring some really exciting models into the film industry that are really driving diversity and inclusion. So over to you, Prana.
Thanks, Danielle. Thank you. Yeah, so I guess just to give everyone a little bit of context on myself, I'm a tech entrepreneur based in Silicon Valley, and I develop mobile apps in the entertainment space. I have created apps that have reached 1 billion people around the world. And I've been using data and artificial intelligence to basically create entertainment experiences for over a decade. I previously made music apps using machine learning to help people make music on their phones. And my current company, Hooked, is in the storytelling space. Hooked is the #1 mobile storytelling platform for Gen Z. We tell stories in 3 formats: text, audio, and video. And we have reached over 100 million viewers around the world. And the secret to our success is data. So as Danielle mentioned, we have pioneered a new approach to IP development, where we basically use data to determine which IP to produce and to basically test IP at different stages of the development funnel. We collect data to understand which stories are resonating with audiences in text format. Essentially, we test scripts, and based on what the data is telling us, we decide which original IP to produce. As a result of this, we have produced several original shows for our mobile platform that have reached hundreds of millions of viewers around the world. But also, these shows are incredibly diverse. And the reason that we're able to do this is because our data allows us to take a risk on unproven creators, on diverse storylines, on new faces, and prove before we're investing significant money, prove that there's actually demand for those stories. And so we are able to really use data and artificial intelligence as a force for good. And, you know, as Carissa mentioned, stories and film in particular, they reflect our culture, but in a lot of ways, they also help move our culture forward. And I believe that as storytellers, it's our responsibility to make sure that we are at the cutting edge and we are telling stories that reflect our world as it is, but also the world that we want to create. And so, you know, I can kind of give you some examples of how we're doing this and how we're using data in a way to what I believe is kind of help push the industry forward. So maybe we can start by just showing our diversity stats. Danielle?
Yes, could we
Mom, this is so weird and scary. All my front teeth feel loose. This shouldn't be happening at my age.
Leave them alone.
Can you come home?
I'm leaving right now. Whatever you do, don't pull on them.
I want to. I have to. I'm pulling on one of them now. It's swinging like a hinge.
Stop it!
It feels so good, though. Mom, I'm scared. Should I call a dentist?
No. He won't know what to do.
Oh, no.
What?
So, in true tech fashion, I've brought something in before I should have. Sorry, Prerna. But maybe whilst we're getting the stats up, you could just give us some context to that clip. That would be brilliant.
Yeah,
Thanks.
yeah. So, yes. So that was an example of one of the scripts, basically how we test scripts. So we have invented this new format for mobile storytelling. It's become known as chat fiction. You may have seen some of our ads or some clips on YouTube over the years. But the basic idea is, you know, this allows us to take stories, scripts, and convert them into a format that makes them easy and interesting to read on a mobile phone. And so the clip that you saw is an example of a horror script that we tested. It's called Starling. This story was extremely popular in text format. It reached hundreds of millions of people all over the world. We translated it in a dozen languages, and we saw incredible engagement stats on this story everywhere that we launched it. And this was written by a professional writer. One thing I wanted to mention is our platform is not user-generated content. It's we work with professionals, professional writers, professional actors, professional directors. And so this was written by one of the writers in our network. And the stats kind of blew us away. And so then we started to think about, okay, let's invest in producing this into an actual movie for our users. And so as we went into, you know, the production phase, you know, we were armed with this data that told us, okay, this story, we know this thing is going to work. We know it's going to be a hit because we have such solid evidence telling us that it doesn't, you know, anywhere in the world, people between the ages of 13 and 35 loves something about this storyline. And so that kind of pushed us to think about, as we went into casting, you know, can we go with a diverse cast? Can we go with a diverse cast and also maybe you know, find a lead actress who hasn't, who's in kind of a new face and who hasn't been discovered yet. And the reason behind this was because our data tells us that this script is going to work and this is going to be a hit, we don't need to rely necessarily on people who have succeeded in the past to help de-risk this investment and make this movie a success. We can take a chance on new actors, on diverse faces especially. And so as we did our casting call, we did kind of the traditional casting call, and we had, actors from SAG and everything apply. But we also decided to use some data and use tech platforms to see if we can find someone undiscovered. So we use our algorithms to identify some up and coming talent on TikTok. And we reached out to a few people who were relatively small on TikTok, but starting to get bigger and wanted to be, were actors, had taken acting classes, but hadn't broken through yet. We invited a few people to apply to our audition. And in the end, a young woman named Tatiana Joseph ended up really blowing us away. And so she won out from all of the more known faces, and we ended up casting her. And the film was extremely successful. And this was actually filmed during the pandemic, so it was done primarily remotely. So there's a lot of FaceTime and stuff happening in this, although, not all of our films are like that. But we can maybe show a clip now of Starling, the movie.
Mom, please pick up. Mom!
What is it, Aisha? I am late for work.
My front tooth popped out.
What do you mean, popped out? Did you hit your mouth on something?
No, I woke up and it was loose and I wiggled it and it just came out.
This can't be happening already.
What can't be happening?
Well, what I think is fascinating there is obviously the journey that you took, Prerna, with the kind of written down script, and then obviously how this materialized. What I've got here actually is I've got your stats in front of me, and I thought we'd do a bit of a tag team. What you think? I'll talk about Hollywood stats, and you tell us hooked stats, and that way we can give the audience a sense of what you've done. So what I can see here is female leads, yeah, 44% in Hollywood, and in hooks you've got
90%.
Great. I feel like we're gonna build this tag team, Prerna. We're gonna build it. I've got female directors at 15%, and at Hooked,
and we're at 40%.
I've got BIPOC leads 28%.
At Hooked, we're 60%,
and BIPOC directors 15%.
Hooked is 45%.
So here there is a real example of how data can be used to drive diversity and inclusion, and really get storytellers that are driving interest and have a community to be heard. So what I've seen here is a journey so far. I've heard Julie say that the media and entertainment industry has an opportunity with privacy to drive really exciting innovations when it comes to privacy and putting the consumer first. I've had Carissa tell me all about the philosophy behind data and how we need to make it tangible and less opaque, and how we make it something that people can understand and follow. And then we've looked at the innovation with Prerna. Now I'm really excited to bring Jan in now, because I think you're going to kind of bring us all back together. We've looked at the governance side. We've looked at the kind of philosophy. We're looking at the startup world. Now, Jan from the Council of Europe, I really hope you're going to tell us what is the Council of Europe's digital strategy, and how does the film industry and everything we've learned here today play into that?
Thank you very much, and hi everyone. That's a very tall order, Danielle. You're giving me to pull it all together, but I try to at least connect some dots here, if I may. Perhaps in 3 points. What is the Council of Europe? What is our relation with these technologies? And what is the impact on the film industry? First, what's the Council of Europe? We're not the European Union. The Council of Europe is the oldest European organization. It's also much bigger than the European Union. We bring together 47 countries and 5 observers, representing some 820 million people. The organization was set up by the likes of Winston Churchill in the wake of World War II to prevent the horrors that occurred then from reoccurring. And therefore, our mandate is to protect human rights, rule of law, and democracy. And we do that through law, basically, through treaties, which are then incorporated into national law, supervised at national level by courts, and at international level, for instance, by the European Court of Human Rights, and a whole series of other bodies. Very early on, the Council of Europe realized that new technologies could have a real impact on human rights and rule of law, and also on the democratic process. And therefore, this year, we celebrate 40 years of data protection. Already 40 years ago, the Council of Europe came up with a treaty on data protection, setting standards on how to process data, and several of the issues that were mentioned earlier on in this panel, notably by Julie. That convention has become, the treaty convention, as we call it here, has become a global standard. We now have more than 55 countries of virtually every continent that have acceded to it, representing each continent. We were active with what we call capacity building, helping countries in some 100 countries last year. So the Council of Europe, although it's a regional organization, really sets global standards here. We do the same for cybercrime, for instance, and we are currently also elaborating what will become the world's first treaty on artificial intelligence. So far, a lot has been said about data, less about artificial intelligence. But how do we collect first and then process the data that were mentioned and make them relevant to, for instance, the film industry? Artificial intelligence is the process here, and it has made the exploitation of big data possible. But it is also, and of course, it has created fantastic opportunities. Let me say that first, like every technology, there are opportunities and risks, and certainly artificial intelligence has created fantastic opportunities. We're still in a pandemic, but fortunately, we have started vaccination, and that has only been possible because we have artificial intelligence, because the research and the production and the data necessary for producing the vaccines, getting in real time, sharing the information, has only been possible through these new technologies. So fantastic opportunities, but also real risks. We all live what someone has called on lives these days. We spend a lot of our time in the online environment and produce massive amount of data, which are used by many, but in fact collected by few. And when they are used to often to create profiles, as we know, and we see that in our consumer behavior. And you all know the examples that when you buy a pair of shoes on the internet, and you'll be inundated with shoe advertising for the weeks to come. Just to give you an example, and there are many more. However, unfortunately, and that is a question I would have to Prona, is the collection of data, of course, also leads, through artificial intelligence, leads to what we call the filter bubbles. That is to say, people get choices, their choice in fact reduced. We all thought that when the internet offers fantastic opportunities, massive amount of information, but in fact, for many people, the amount of information to which they have access is reduced because they're being fed information. They're being fed information because the data they have shared has been processed. On the basis of that processing, profiles have been created, and what is proposed to the customer is information, commercials, ads, if you like, but also political messages based on the preferences that these people have expressed in the past. So prejudices are reinforced, and the exposure to critical thought or to simply other thought, other ideas than your own, is very much, or risks at least, being very much limited. And that, I think, is something that poses risk to human rights, namely the right to freedom of expression and cultural diversity. It could reduce cultural diversity. And it could also reduce the variety. And now I come to the third point, to stay in time, just 1 minute more, if I may, Danielle, for this introduction, the choice that the film industry offers. Because what could this lead to? We've already seen that, and we just heard that whether a story is a good story is basically, sorry, not basically, is inter alia based on data, which indicate whether a story would be liked. And my question is, but is this liked because people have liked similar stories in the past, and are they therefore likely to like this one? Or would they perhaps be ready for something totally new? Or as Monty Python said at the time, and now for something completely different. Or perhaps that's completely different. It's perhaps not so much there anymore these days, although I would think it is particularly useful and necessary, more than useful. AI can also, we can have now script. We not only can we identify storylines and endings and target audiences, but scripts can be written by algorithms. Music scores can be written by algorithms. We can have deep fakes replacing actors, or we can have ghost actors. All that is possible. Within the Council of Europe, our governments think that it is necessary to come up with some rules, which is why working on this possible AI treaty. I can tell a bit more about it later. But the basic idea is we should not just leave it all to self-regulation, as it's called, not just leave it just to the industry. There must be some basic rules, as on data protection and artificial intelligence, that would guarantee that we keep diversity and that we adhere to certain standards when using all these wonderful technologies to make sure that they remain wonderful and do not become a menace. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. I really think what I see from what you've said there, it's really this hybrid approach. It's keeping the human in the tech, right? And it's something that we've heard a lot when we go into the kind of tech discussion environments generally, this human-centered AI, human-centered data, human-centered storytelling. And I think there is something to that, because when you build frameworks at a regulation level, you are there to empower the industry, to empower democracy, to empower possibilities and diversity. So I think if we're going to take that journey, then we're going to do something really great. And if we can inspire others to join it, it would be even better. I've actually got some questions coming in here. And, one thing that I think filmmakers really deeply associate with privacy is actually piracy. Just to take just to do a word flow there, privacy and piracy. I think a lot of filmmakers are really concerned that with all these kind of data hacking expertise and everything that goes around data protection and privacy, they're worried about their original content. They're worried that their content will get out there. And I wonder if anyone in the panel feels up to sharing their perspective. Maybe, Julie, you have some insights here that could be interesting for our filmmakers.
Security of systems is incredibly important. Piracy, like privacy, has been something that people have been talking about for a very long time. I think that piracy is something that is of concern in many industries. When you think about IP being stolen, when you think about corporate sort of the crown jewels of many companies, does involve information. It involves their intellectual property. And just like with directors and producers, where their crown jewel is their actual film, and what could happen to their film in terms of piracy, the same with many, many companies. There are technological solutions to piracy in terms of, kind of high-tech watermarking, if you will, to help track and trace where films are being stolen and shown and things like that. But much, picking this up a level and sort of really, sort of focusing on security more generally, I think what the film industry, just like every other industry, needs to think through quite clearly is, as they're moving forward with digital transformation and as they're using much more data in some incredible ways, I just have to say, Purna, the work that you're doing and what you're able to drive through a data-driven system and technology was just remarkable. And as we see more and more of that, more and more diversity, more and more accessibility, and more use of technology. Yes, directors, producers, creatives do need to be thinking deeply about security as well. And security is going to mean that they have to ensure that they're working with systems, vendors, partners who understand deeply what it takes to secure their products and services. We would not expect a director or a writer or a PERNA to be focused on how to protect their work from piracy or from hacking or from ransomware, just to mention 3 types of security concerns. But what we do expect is that those entities, Microsoft, of course, being one of the major ones, but we expect partners of the creatives and partners of the industry to be the ones that will help drive deep embedded security at depth.
Thanks, Julie. I don't know, Prerna. Yes, go for it. Sorry.
Yeah. I wanted to just add to Julie's remarks. You know, I'm clearly going to be taking the very pro tech, pro data perspective here, but I think piracy is a very interesting example where machine learning has been a solution to the problem. You know, the high watermark technology, the fingerprinting technology that Julie mentioned, that's artificial intelligence. And so, yes, technology creates problems, but, you know, also technology comes back and offers solutions to those problems. If I could also take a moment to just address one of the questions that Jan posed to me, you know, this idea that, you know, as we start using data and machine learning to determine which stories to produce, are we reducing choice? And are we, you know, are we just producing something because it's that type of story has been liked before? And although I think we see this a lot in the unscripted world, you know, with all the little clips that get shared on social media, news clips and things like that, which I believe is what you're referring to, I would argue that in the film industry, we are actually doing the exact opposite. So if you think about how Hollywood makes production decisions today, which is primarily through a lack of using sophisticated data yet, it's actually much more based on what has been liked in the past. So a Hollywood executive, you know, when they're trying to decide whether to greenlight a project, they don't currently have the ability to test scripts in real time. If you would like to, you can come work with us. But because they're not able to do that, because they don't have data on that particular project, they make decisions based on the sorts of stories that have succeeded in the past and based on people that have succeeded in the past: creators, writers, directors, actors. And so we currently are much more likely to be producing and to, as consumers, be fed stories that look and feel very similar to the things we've seen in the past, and we have reduced choice. And what we're saying is our data, our machine learning algorithms allow us to take risks on really weird stories that are being created by people who've not succeeded in the past. And as a result, we are actually increasing choice, we're increasing diversity, and we're increasing innovation, and the types of stories that our audiences are seeing are different and unique.
May I jump in for one more moment?
Yes, of course, Julie. That is my pleasure.
On that. I mean, one of the things that I think we need to focus on to build on what Prerna just mentioned is, you know, data can be used for good and data can be used to harm people. What we need to, just as Prerna just said, you know, there will be times when data might be used to reduce choice. And there will be other times when data, just as in It's a Wonderful Life, will be used to break through the way that Potter was engaged in only lending to people that he thought were wealthy and rich, etc., and broaden out the group of people who will receive loans and be able to build homes, etc. Data can be used in a very appropriate and inclusive and broadening fashion. The issue is not data. The issue is not technology per se. The issue is, how are these tools going to be used in order to build an inclusive society and not an exclusive society? And I think that one of the ways to begin that journey is to really be thinking deeply about whether or not you have appropriate controls around data, whether you are using data for the purpose that individuals think that you are collecting their data for and using their data for, whether you're doing things like deleting data when you no longer need it. These are sort of simple principles: data minimization, data specification, use specification, things like that. They're very simple principles, but they get you very, very far in terms of helping to build the kinds of systems that will use data and AI and technology for good, and not for purposes that will end up harming people or causing the kind of distrust that will lead to people not wanting to use technology. So I think it's not data and technology itself. We need to be thinking more deeply and really more expansively about the systems and controls and actually regulations, which many governments are already thinking about, that will be put in place to ensure that these technologies are used for good.
Well, I'll pick up on that, Julie, actually, and bring Carissa in, if that's okay. I've just got one comment, and then I'm going to bring you in, Carissa, because it's exactly my question is for you. And I think it's really exciting we're talking about this, because we're looking at different culture of data collection, really, when you mentioned that, Julie. You know, we're looking at geopolitical powers that Carissa mentioned. And I'm actually going to bring it back to the film industry here, because I do think it's a powerful tool, obviously, for any kind of democratic or non-democratic use, especially in terms of film content that into the industry. So we're looking at some of the biggest film industries in the world right now: China, India, Nigeria, you know, Hollywood. How, if regulations are in place and they are different in all the different regions, what kind of content are we going to be getting, and what kind of people are we empowering with that content? Maybe Carissa, I'll give you some space to talk about that.
Thank you. Well, this is where Jan's work comes in, and many other people's. One of the primary to-do list right now is to have better diplomacy. We need to come together as democracies and have new agreements, much like we had the Declaration of Human Rights. And we need to agree on things like data, AI, and cybersecurity. Those are the three big ones. Because data doesn't respect any frontiers. It flows like water. You can't stop it. And if we don't have strong alliances, we are not going to stand a very good chance against possible rivals that have very different views and uses of data. And I kind of disagree a bit with Julie about that. You know, data is not the problem in itself. Data inherently is a matter of power. The more somebody knows about you, the more they can influence your behavior, and the more you become vulnerable to them. And in some cases, that's okay. We want to give data to our doctor for them to help us, and we have to do that. But that makes us vulnerable, and that vulnerability has to be acknowledged and has to be protected. So one of the things I argue in my book is that in addition to stopping the data economy, ending the data economy because it's just too dangerous to sell and buy personal data, we should implement fiduciary duties related to personal data. Fiduciary duties are duties that are relevant when there is a professional relationship and there's a lot of asymmetry in power. So typical cases are lawyers and clients, doctors and patients, and financial advisors and clients. In these cases, you entrust something very valuable to a professional who can have conflicts of interest. So you can imagine your doctor wanting to perform surgery on you because they want to earn some extra money or have an extra data point or practice their skills or whatever, and they cannot do that. They can only perform surgery on you if it's going to be in your behalf, if it's going to help you for your benefit. And whenever there's a conflict of interest, they have to choose you first. In the same way, whoever wants to collect or manage personal data, fine, they can do it. They cannot sell it, and they have to accept a duty of responsibility. They have to commit to keeping that data safe and to only use it to benefit data subjects. And if they don't want to have that responsibility, then they should find another job. Just like it's not enough to be a doctor to want to open people up. You have to accept that duty of care that comes with the job. And in the same way, whoever wants the data, it's so sensitive and so dangerous that they have to have a lot of a duty of care attached to it. And one of the things that I'm worried about the film industry, that, you know, I agree with Perna and Julie that we can use data for good in the context of film, of course, but we cannot count that that's going to be the case. Right now, I think it's obvious that personal data is being misused, that it's being used to harm people, that it has led to inequality, racism, sexism. I think that's just blatantly clear, and we have to change that. And one of the things that I'm worried about, that is related to Jan's comments, is about these bubbles. And one trend in film is not what everybody wants to do, but one trend in film is to create more and more personalized content. So just like you have personalized ads, which I think we should ban, the idea is that depending on your personality, you will see a film and it will be different for you than for everyone else. And I think this is really dangerous. It kind of fractures the public sphere. Because when there's common content, we can all share it. It creates a culture. We can talk about it. We can discuss it. We can criticize it. Academics, ordinary people, journalists, anyone. When we all see something different, then we become isolated by definition. And that is really bad for democracy and for the citizenry. So I think film should have a role of joining people together and creating culture and not separating us and isolating us through data. And then finally, just to comment on something that Perna said, on the one hand, I feel kind of the pull of the idea that we can use data to actually produce certain kinds of films that wouldn't be produced in other circumstances. But at the same time, I feel like one of the problems with algorithms is that they are automatic, they're systematic, they produce the same kind of thing. And in many ways, I think we have to allow space for decisions that are not made with data, and for spaces that are not populated by surveillance and algorithms and tech in general. And that creates a kind of richness, humane richness. To give an example, one of my favorite shows ever is Seinfeld. And Seinfeld is a show about nothing, which is not an attractive kind of pitch. And there was a lot of controversy in NBC about whether they should produce it or not. And I think it's very likely that if they had used data, it wouldn't have been produced, because even the first episodes weren't that successful. In a way, Seinfeld created the culture that made it a huge success. And if we had used data, it's very unclear to me that we had, somebody might have supported that. So we need to keep an open mind and remember that creativity and art and ethics are things that are very human and that are not necessarily made better by tech.
Carissa, I think you made so many points to refer to, but I will just pick up on one that I particularly liked with the film industry, which is, this idea of not all seeing a film in your own eyes, and I think that's so powerful, the comment you made there, because I just think about extreme situations where I've seen people with completely different opinions on even just the most simple entertainment story, and how they bring that to their life by watching it with other people they would never usually sit with, have dinner with, and that kind of community experience around watching something that you are completely allowed to have an opinion about on your own. Nobody's going to question you. You're sat in a cinema, you're watching it by yourself, but everybody's watching it. And so there is just some kind of human energy there that I do think is obviously spectacular. And being a film person myself, I'm not going to take away from the beauty that is the magic of sitting and watching one film together with people in a room. I do think it's super powerful. And I think I'm bringing some points together here with what everyone said, but I do believe that what we're talking about is not moving from one side to the other in such radical ways, We're not saying let's trend all film content and only watch what the algorithms tell us. We're not saying that, Hollywood should stay archaic and not use data at all. We're not saying that we shouldn't have original, beautiful, human-made content. Maybe bringing Frank Sinatra to life in a film would please me. That's my personal perspective. But knowing the difference and that being disclaimed and audiences understanding what is real and what is not, and what is fake and what is not, and what a story is and what it isn't, is a duty that regulatory frameworks have to play. And I think, as you very lightly pushed on, Carissa, and very strongly pushed on, Jan, that, you know, there is a danger that perhaps one or two in the film media space are taking ownership, and we should diversify that, and regulation can play a huge role there. Would you like any final comments? Because I think the questions, I don't have any other questions here. So would you like some final comments? I give you 30 seconds each to kind of summarize. Go, Jan, please. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Yes, thank you very much. And I would share Carissa's views on Seinfeld, just for the record. But the question of diversity, I know it's one of the themes of this year's Cannes Film Festival, and quite rightly so. And Prerna, thank you very much, by the way, for your very detailed and very reassuring answer to my query. Is diversity. It's been addressed, I think, so far. It's the diversity of the data. If we collect data from data can perpetuate prejudices. We give you an example from the criminal law field, in which I'm also active. AI has been used in a criminal law context, for instance, for parole boards, and it was found that in the US, for instance, and Julie will know this example better than I do, that Afro-American suspects were much less likely to be released on bail, for instance, because when AI was used, the AI calculated that given the number of Afro-Americans in detention in the United States, the chance that the Afro-American suspect was the real killer or whatever, the perpetrator, was considered much higher than if it was a white American. And there have been absolutely scandalous cases where murderers were let free and totally innocent people were kept in prison. We have a lot of examples where, another example, Amazon at some point in Europe at least announced in big advertisements in the newspaper that human resources would no longer use artificial intelligence and data collection for its recruitment policy, because it had come to realize that no female candidates made it past the first stage, because at that point, Amazon did not have any senior female executives, and therefore the algorithms plus the data led to the conclusion that female candidates could not possibly be suitable for high executive functions. So that was an obvious case. There are many others. I think it's also important to realize that many AI programs at the moment are designed and developed by white men, and that there is both a real lack of cultural diversity and a real lack. So just last.
Sorry, no, we lost you a bit just for a few seconds there, just so you know. It's okay. We've got you back.
Sorry about that. No, I was saying the lack of gender diversity. A lot of these programs are being written by white men. The perpetuating already existing prejudices in society, and I think that is very important to be aware of when using these technologies in order to counter that. And from what I understand from Prerna, she's very much aware of this, and her company is doing so. And I hope this panel will lead to, or this whole event will lead to a greater awareness. I'm very happy that it's a theme for this year's Cannes Festival. Thank you.
Thank you. Julie, some closing comments?
Sure. So first of all, this has been an incredibly rich discussion, and I'm so glad to have been part of it. And Danielle and Think-Film, thank you for organizing it. Look, there are definitely opportunities and risks when you use technology, and I think we need to recognize that as a society and as cultures, we are on a journey to constantly being improving how we approach these issues. Bias, fairness, security, privacy, safety, accountability, and transparency all need to be built into artificial intelligence systems. And when we discover that our systems do have the effect that Jan has just mentioned, which unfortunately does happen, there's no question, we need to examine why, and we need to change. And these are things that I think many of us are deeply, deeply committed to. The obverse is also true, which is if we're not going to use technology, if we're not going to use data to start empowering communities that have been traditionally discriminated against or traditionally harmed or traditionally left out, then we will not be on a journey of improving our culture and our society. Think about the COVID crisis and how it impacted communities of color in the United States, just as an example. Black, African American, other communities, the elderly were deeply impacted. And frankly, the lack of our use of data in the United States caught us flat-footed and unable to address the particular communities that were really being impacted. So what we need, I think, whether Carissa's proposal around creating data fiduciaries will win the debate at the end or not, what I think we can all agree upon is we need guardrails. We need frameworks. We need rules that we can agree on as global norms for how these systems will be used, so that we are constantly evolving and moving into a better place with respect to the use of data, to ensure that we're not devolving to our traditional human prejudices, which is what I was referring to before by referencing Potter and his lending activity. But instead, we broaden our outlook and we use data to help us reach the communities that have been discriminated against, the women and LGBT communities that have been discriminated against. And we start to use data for good. But it's going to require a lot of conversations and creating the kind of frameworks and guardrails that will allow that process to more easily happen. Will there be mistakes made along the way? Absolutely, because we're human. But we have to, I believe, go on that path to strive to create systems that do create those kinds of global norms.
Thank you, Julie. And we need storytellers to show us ideas of how that can look and how that can, and give us content that we can be inspired by on this issue. And a few seconds for Prerna and Carissa, a few closing comments, just because we've got to bring the panel to a close. But Prerna, go ahead.
Yeah. So I'll just close by, addressing this idea that that data is the problem. And I know Julie and Carissa took two different perspectives here, that data is evil, or that data and algorithms are necessarily going to suck the humanity, out of life, out of our creative endeavors, out of art. This assumes that data is something new that big tech has created, but data is not new. It is as old as humankind. Data is fundamental to us as humans. We are data processing machines. We use data in our environments. We analyze data. Our brains are analyzing data all the time to understand what's in our environment and to keep us alive and to help us thrive. It is what makes us exceptional as a species, that we are such incredible data processing machines and we have such incredible algorithms running in our brains all the time. And as storytellers, we have used data from the beginning of time when, stories were oral initially, and storytellers would travel from village to village and they would tell the same story in each village. And they would use cues from the audience, data, to understand, when do people's eyes light up? When do they laugh? When do they cry? When do they get bored? And they would use that data to make their stories better the next time they told it. And in a sense, that's why our oldest stories are the best. They are the ones that have endured through centuries, through generations, because they have had the most data to make those stories truly great and truly universal. And so what I would say is that I think it's important for us to remember that data is fundamental to us as humans, but the problem today is that, as Jan mentioned, there are a few entities, a small number of entities, large corporations, many of them big tech corporations, and governments that are collecting inordinate amounts of data about all of us and are in a position to be able to use, and in many cases are using data to manipulate us as individuals. And so although I am pro-tech, I'm pro-data, pro-algorithms, I believe that the work that Jan and Carissa and Julie are doing to make sure that there are guardrails in place, to make sure there is regulation, is very, very important. I commend you for all of your efforts, but I do hope that, you know, people do understand that data itself is not evil, and there are also opportunities for us in the film industry and as storytellers to truly use data as a force for good.
Thank you, Brenna. And Carissa?
I agree. Data is not evil, but it's dangerous. It's sensitive, and it has to be treated as such. And although it's not new, and we've always had data, and we are data processing machines, if you want to call it, we have never had this amount of data ever before. There are things that now we translate into data that we have never translated before. And maybe there are certain things that shouldn't be translated into data, that shouldn't be recorded, and certainly not saved forever. Julie mentioned the necessity to delete data once it's not necessary. And that's something we're not doing at the moment. You know, nature had certain functions in place to regulate data. You naturally forget things, and that helps you partly to filter what's important and partly to forgive. Societies that never forget are very harsh. And right now we are remembering everything. We're not deleting anything. And there's a good argument for why that is very unwise, to say the least. And when I talk about the end of the data economy, some people think that it's radical. But what's really radical is to have a business model that depends on the systematic and mass violation of rights. And that's what we have. It's not a few companies collecting data. It's thousands and thousands and thousands and misusing it. And we have to change that. But of course, I'm pro-tech, and I think data can be used for good. But we need to work a lot to make that happen. And I wish to end on a note of kind of optimism that I wish that we were more ambitious, that we would dream about better tech, about tech that protects rights, that inspire us. And I hope that the film industry can help us dream better worlds, worlds in which there's tech that protects and enhances democracy, and that doesn't become a dystopia or a police state or a surveillance society.
Well, I think that was a great comment to end on. I think I'm going to say, well, it's obviously started here. We're doing impACT. We're having this conversation. We want better tech. We want a better film industry that gives us stories, that shows us possibilities, and that protects our rights and looks to the future in a positive way. So I want to thank you all as incredible panelists. It's been really exciting to talk to you today, and I just hope this conversation gets bigger and better every year. Thank you very much.